Okay, how's it going, everybody? My name is Infamous Isaac. I'm here with a video on Captain America, the first movie in Marvel that wasn't Iron Man or the Incredible Hulk. So we're getting something different here. So by the time I'm recording this first movie, and by the time I record the second one, there's gonna be a bit of a gap between the two. Not like a huge gap, but enough for it to not be the same day that I recorded the first movie, right? So just be aware that it's like the same way I'm handling Black Panther 1 and Black Panther 2, or the way I handled that. So just be aware of that. But regardless, let me get into the non spoiler review for Captain America. So, for this movie, I gotta say straight out from the gate, this movie's a 7.5 out of 10. I really enjoyed it. Not like it's great, but I enjoyed it so much when I was watching it. It was just so funny. It had so much charm. The quips were cool. The character himself, he was dope. I really enjoyed Captain America in this movie. Chris Evans is a good actor. I didn't get like the Tony Stark vibe from him where he was just super expressive and all that, but he had his little quips. He was enjoyable for sure, and I definitely got that Captain America vibe from him. So I thought that was dope. I like the supporting cast, at least the ones that we got to know well, and just overall the time period as well. I thought it was interesting. The setting of the movie and the vibe of it too. It's a little dated, but that's because of the time period that it takes in. So just be aware of that when you go into it. But overall, this movie was just fun. It was cool, and it was a good watch. It was a nice palate cleanser from Iron Man 2. So much personality in it, and I really enjoyed that. It definitely made me a fan of Captain America. He's not my favorite superhero, not at all, but I definitely enjoyed this Marvel version of him, and I can see how in other movies he just only gets better. So I'm really excited to see how he progresses forward in future movies. But for this one, it didn't do anything offensive, like in terms of, wow, this movie is terrible. But it was enjoyable enough to not be anything bad or anything mid. I really gave it a chance and I enjoyed it. So I recommend it. 7.5 out of 10. The music isn't anything to stand out. Like, if anything, I don't remember if this music or this movie had any music, like, at all. But you were here for the story and the characters. The action was cool. It was definitely a nice change of pace, especially because Captain America has a shield. So it was definitely nice to see that. But you were here for the story and the characters for sure. But regardless, 7.5 out of 10. Now it's time to get into the spoilers. So, as per usual, if you don't want to be spoiled for this movie, it came out 12 years ago, but no matter what time a movie has between the current day, it still is necessary to say that spoilers will be talked about because I haven't watched this movie. I never watched this movie before. So it's still new to me, right? But regardless, if you don't want to be spoiled, leave now. The video will always be here as long as my channel doesn't blow up, right? So let's get into it. So this movie takes place in the 1940s during World War II, and we start off with Steve Rogers. So Steve Rogers and James Barnes, two friends who live in Brooklyn who grew up together and are just good compatriots, right? Barnes got into the military because he wants to fight in World War II, right? He wants to defend his country, and since the draft selection's going on, you basically need to. And if you can't, then you can't, right? And so Steve Rogers is one of those people that can't because he has like every disease known to man. He just has every disability that doesn't allow him to fight, right? He's a normal guy. He can function just fine. It's just that he's really anemic and very skinny. He has asthma, all this stuff. He just isn't able to fight with the standard that is provided for the military, right? And so he's just disappointed. He really wants to go out there with Bucky and fight for his country. Not to kill people, but to defend it, basically. And so when him and Bucky are out having a double date, Steve just can't stop thinking about it because he sees another draft thing going on at their date. And so he's like, yo, I'll be back real quick. And then Bucky's like, dog, come on, man. Like, this is the last time we're going to be together, bro. And then Steve is just basically like, don't worry, man. I'll be there when you go to the draft. You'll see me in the military. Don't end the war before I get there. And so they hug it out, really good friends, and Steve goes to this draft thing that's going on. The man falsified his draft eligibility 5 times, and now this is gonna be a sixth. And so this doctor or Erskine basically goes up to him. He's like, "Yo, so why do you want to be drafted, right?" And he's basically like, "Yeah, I want to defend the country. I don't want to kill people. I just want to defend it." And so he's basically testing if Rogers is a good person or not, if he's a good man, especially with the fact that he's so weak. He's at the bottom, so if he was given strength, how would he act at the top? And his morals don't change, you know. He would be the same person he would be or he is now. And so Erskine is just basically like, yeah, all right, you pass, and he gets drafted, right? And so he gets sent to the military. He has all this stuff going on. There we meet Agent Carter, a female agent, and this is where we see the blooming roses of their relationship budding and all that. And then we go to an important scene where we see the sergeant basically test if any of them are ready to undergo the super soldier experiment, which is why Erskine brought Rogers there in the first place, and he believes that he can do it, right? And so the sergeant tests it by pinning or unpinning a live grenade, right? And they don't know that. They don't know that it's actually fake, but they think that it's real. And so they all duck for cover, and Rogers basically sacrifices his life to get under the grenade so nothing gets damaged and nobody dies. Little did he know it was a fake grenade. So it just proved that like he's ready. He's ready to go for the super soldier. And so they bring him back to Brooklyn, and this is where we see the experiments go on. And but before they fully go over there, him and Erskine have a conversation. It's basically like, "Why'd you pick me?" And it was because he wanted to find a good man the second time. And we find out that the first person was Red Skull, and basically Johann Smith. He was Erskine's first experiment. He was going to be the super soldier in Germany, but then he left because he was a terrible man. He was generally just a man obsessed with power who wanted to become a god and unite the whole world under him. But that's not freedom. That's not freedom at all. And so they're against it, right? And so Erskine goes to America. He lives in Queens, and now he found Steve, right? And so before they go over there again, they're just having this conversation, they're chatting up, and he basically decides like, yeah, man, like you're him. You're literally him. You're gonna be the man that helps us all. You know, not as a god, but as a man himself. You are supposed to be the super soldier. They do the test. It goes perfectly. It's full sales, all good, right? And Howard Stark is also there, and we see him. You know, if you know, Tony Stark is his son, and so we see the groundwork laid basically for the Avengers. So it's all really cool. But regardless, everything goes well, and we see Steve Rogers just a completely different man. From the skinny man who he was before, the skinny boy he was before, to the man that he became, he is a completely different person. And Carter notices this because she noticed the man that was Steve Rogers, but now she notices the man that is Captain America as well. Two of the same man. Like he hasn't changed, it's just that he's stronger now. We find out that an agent was in the experiment the whole time, and he kills Erskine and he leaves. Steve goes after him. He manages to get him. This whole crazy chase. Man can keep up with a car on barefoot as well. He can keep up with a car barefoot. So this is just crazy. But they go back to Erskine. He's dead, and now Captain America is basically used as propaganda to get people to enlist in the draft, right? Even though he was supposed to be out in the front lines fighting the war as well. So after a couple months of them pro- just spreading all this propaganda for people to enlist, like the Uncle Sam type stuff, now Captain America's the new face, right? And so when he's sent to the army to basically boost morale, it doesn't work. And so him and Carter are talking because she's also there. She tells him about the 107, which is basically Bucky's platoon, right? And his father and his mother were in the platoon. And so he tries to figure out if Bucky's dead or not. The the sergeant that was there in the experiment, who is now leading this group, is like, yeah, I don't know, I don't know. So Rogers is basically like, yo, I'm gonna go save him. I'm gonna save Bucky. I'm gonna save the group, and I'm gonna come back alive. So I need help. And if anything, just don't tell anybody. And then Carter's just like, all right, I'm going with you. And so her, Howard Stark, and Rogers all go to save Bucky and the group. And it's super cool because we really get to see Rogers flex his whole powers now. And it was a nice scene. I really enjoyed it. We get to see Bucky and him reunite. We saw that he was brainwashed basically. It was all just really cool. Everybody got out alive. Rogers comes back marching everybody to the base because they had a receiver, a receiver so that Howard could know when to go pick them all up. It broke because a bullet got intercepted, right? And so, as they march back into the platoon, right? Everybody's alive. The hopes are still there for the war to switch, right? To sway the odds of the war. And so, everybody's talking, everybody's chilling. Bucky and him are having a good time. Again, we see more of the roses of their relationship budding between Carter and Rogers. And now we basically just have all of them going on crazy missions. And then we have one final mission, final for a reason, where Bucky, Rogers, and the group that they saved all go onto a ship, right? And they're basically getting Johann Smith's scientists because back when Rogers invaded the ship, he basically they had to split up, right? And so what we know is that Johann Smith, aka Red Skull, is using the Tesseract, which is an important thing from Odin all the way back in the Ragnarok days, where he had power basically, and he's using that to basically become a god, right? Unlimited knowledge, all that stuff. And so while they're looking for that scientist, Bucky gets flung out of the train as Rogers tries to save him, but he can't, and he's basically presumed dead at this point. Rogers is clearly upset by this, and he goes back home, or not back home. He goes back to the army, to the platoon that he's working with. He's just upset, really upset. He can't even get drunk anymore because of his the experiment, right? And so Carter's comforting him. He's basically like, "Yo, I'm gonna end this war." And so he goes to Red Skull, and this is where the final battle begins. He basically infiltrates the enemy base by himself while the other people infiltrate from the other end. A one-man army versus an actual army. It's a pretty cool fight. It's him versus Hydra. He manages to get inside, and then he meets up with everybody else. They fly or not fly him, but they drive him to the ship that Johann Smith is departing on, and he gets on it. He's fighting everybody on it, and then he gets to Red Skull, and they have this crazy fight where the ship is flying down, about to crash because that ship was going to nuke all the eastern seaboard of the United States. So Philadelphia, New York, Chicago, Boston, all the important cities, right? And so he has to stop him here and now. So he manages to stop him because the man grabs the Tesseract raw, nothing to protect him, and he just disappears. He doesn't die, he disappears, and you'll see why that's important later on in a bunch of other movies. But regardless, the man basically has to land the plane, but he's not going to be able to. He has to get the plane away from people. And so I think, crashes it in the Antarctic. But this is basically the last time that Carter is ever going to see the man, Steve Rogers. And so they're having a final goodbye because he said that he was going to meet up with her next week to dance. They're in love now. They're basically in love. And so he crashes and he's frozen. He's frozen solid in the Antarctic for 70 years. It is 2011 now. And so SHIELD, the same people that worked with Tony Stark, recruited Captain America. They unfroze him. They brought him to SHIELD. And this is where the movie ends because now he's in New York, 2011. And that's it. That's basically the end of the movie. And I gotta say, this movie was so much fun. I loved seeing Steve Rogers in the beginning when he was nothing. He was just a guy who wanted to enlist in the army, but he had the heart, but he didn't have the body, right? And so seeing a genuine, earnest doctor not try to exploit him and learning from his mistakes, try to help him out and basically make him into the man that he always wanted to be was nice. Even though it doesn't matter whether he was strong or not, he had the heart, right? It's like Spider-Man, where anybody can be Captain America. It's just you have to have the heart, you know? And so seeing that was nice, seeing the backstory. Seeing the action, it was cool. It reminds me of like Shang-Chi, where it was refreshing to see somebody fight without like hand-to-hand combat or with like sci-fi or magical weapons. He's literally he's just beefing people with a shield, and it's so cool. I'll be honest, like it was sick. The story was definitely the best part for me. The CGI was, it wasn't Iron Man level in my opinion, but it was good enough. It was passable. Red Skull's skull was really weird looking to me. It was, I don't know, it was jarring for sure, but that was just a minor like complaint. You have the villains, which they're Nazis. Johann Smith, I thought himself was cool. I thought he was a cool villain, but everybody else was kind of like filler. Obviously, we didn't get to see Adolf Hitler because why would Marvel have somebody act as Adolf Hitler? Just having him be mentioned is already enough. But regardless, besides that, the music was meh. It was bland. I couldn't tell you what any music was. Overall, the characters were fun. I really enjoyed them. And this movie was just a fun watch overall. It really gets me excited for Winter Soldier and the Avengers since, he's in there. But regardless, 7.5 out of 10. It reminds me of Iron Man 1, where in that movie we got to see the rise of Iron Man. We get to see a man grow and change and develop in real time. Same with Tony Stark, but the only thing is that Tony Stark was a grown adult. Steve Rogers was like, I'd say like 20s, early to mid 20s, around there. He was still a kid basically. So it felt more intimate here watching him grow like that. But regardless, thank y'all for watching. That's my opinion on this movie. Hope y'all enjoy. And next is gonna be the other one, the sequel. So yeah, I'll see you all there soon. Alright, so I'm back. It's been 6 days since I last recorded the first part of this video, which is crazy because you guys will notice that, but man, it's been a while since I got back to this. But I just finished watching Captain America Winter Soldier, and I'm gonna give the non-spoiler first, and then I'm gonna go into the spoilers for this movie. So if you don't want to hear any of that, then by all means, please leave the video. I know it's a little late to say that because I think it's like 15 to 20 minutes into the video already, but at the end of the day, I still have to say this warning. Don't worry about it if you don't care. But regardless, for the non spoilers, this movie, honestly, I'm having such a hard time deciding. On one hand, it's really good, and on the other hand, it's kind of boring in some parts, but that's mostly for the beginning. The beginning of it was kind of boring, but then, like, an hour, not an hour, but 40 minutes into the movie was when it really got good. But the 40 minutes that I saw in the beginning weren't even bad either. It's just the plot was building up, so I can't blame it for having to have exposition and all this stuff. You have to set the groundwork for the rest of the movie. But the movie itself, I felt like it was really good. I actually enjoyed it a lot. The more I sat with it, the more I realized I think I like this movie more than the first one. I'm honestly gonna give it an 8, a 7.5 to an 8. I really enjoyed it. The villains themselves, they like individually they're not great, but I thought that the main cast was pretty good as well. The acting was pretty good. I thought that the story was pretty good as well. I thought it was better than the first movie. And honestly, I enjoyed this movie. Probably one of the better movies I've seen from this Marvel binge that I've been on. Definitely enjoyable for sure. This movie though definitely isn't one that you can just pick up out of nowhere. You have to watch the first movie. But overall, I definitely recommend it if you like Marvel, and if you don't, then it's just a fun watch for sure. If you go into it blind, there are some stuff that you're gonna miss out, which I highly recommend not doing that. But if you do, there's still gonna be something that you can enjoy from this because the action was crazy. Captain America's movies has some of the craziest action because of the concept of the character. He has a shield, right? So his shield combat is really cool. I really enjoy it, and just the nature of it. But overall, 7.5 to an 8 out of 10. Now it's time for the spoilers. So, as per usual, if you don't want to be spoiled, I highly recommend leaving now. Again, it's kind of late to say that, but if you haven't watched this movie, and I don't blame you for not watching it, I haven't watched all the Marvel movies either, then please leave. If you don't care, then by all means stick around. It's your choice. My video will always be here, at least if YouTube doesn't blow up and if my video doesn't get deleted. So I'll always be here if you choose to come back. But regardless, this movie starts off with Captain America and Black Widow infiltrating infiltrating a ship, and this ship has a bunch of hostages, a bunch of shield hostages, so they have their mission of saving the hostages. So Cap goes in there, he's chilling, he's vibing out, he's taking out all the bad guys, and he doesn't see Natasha anywhere. So when he goes to find her, he sees her extracting information from the computers. He's like, "Yo, what is this? What are you doing?" And she's like, "It is my mission. I had mine and you have yours." And it's like, "But what's with the secrecy?" And she's like, "Nick Fury, you know?" And so they save all the hostages, they take care of the bad guys, they bring them back to Shield, and Cap is furious. He's like, "Yo, come on, how are you gonna send us in a mission? where people have different objectives, you know? I can't lead a group where there isn't complete honesty between all of us. That's not a group at that point. And then Nick is just like, hey man, just know who to trust, you know? At the end of the day, we have our objectives. We're not here to be friends. We're here to get things done, right? Protect the peace. And so they're talking, and Nick Fury drops a pretty cold story where he's talking about his grandfather, how he used to walk to work and walk back home all the time. He had a bunch of tips, everything rolled up into one bag, right? And so at first it was nice. Everybody would say hello. He would say hello back, all this type of stuff, right? It was formalities and niceties and everything. But then as things progressed, as time moved on, the highs turned into keep it steppin' type stuff. And so whenever people tried to mug him, he would show his bag, the tips that he would get, and a 22 caliber Magnum in the gun or in the bag. So it's like, hey, at the end of the day, you can be nice to people, but it doesn't mean that you have to trust them. It's basically what the message of the story was. But regardless, Nick Fury shows Cap what he's been working on, and it's just a bunch of ships, a bunch of helicarriers that are meant to protect the peace, right? They're ahead of the curve before people can shoot the guns at them, right? And so Nick Fury, he realizes that something's going on because he's locked out of one of the initiatives in the Shield database, right? And so he's like, something's going on. I have to prepare. Meanwhile, we have Cap, and he meets somebody named Sam Wilson, pretty important guy, and they're just having fun. You know, they get to know each other. Cap does his morning run. Sam Wilson does his morning run. Cap, being a super soldier, is way faster, but they basically hit it off, right? So remember him for later in the movie. But regardless, as Nick Fury's just leaving, he's trying to get somewhere. He calls Agent Hill, and he's just like, "Yo, get here in 3 hours." And she's like, "Okay." So while he's talking to her, he gets shot at by a bunch of police officers. And for like the next 5 to 10 minutes, it's just a complete car chase between Nick Fury and like all the police officers that are after him. And it was so cool. Oh my god, lie, it was pretty fire. And so at the end of the chase, Nick Fury basically he digs a hole underneath the car because it gets flipped by the Winter Soldier, and he's the not the main antagonist, but one of the antagonists in this movie. He's definitely the best part of this movie, but I'll explain that later. So regardless, Nick Fury ends up in Steve Rogers' apartment, and what we find out is that Steve Rogers' apartment is completely bugged by all Shield agents, right? Nick Fury placed a bunch of them there to watch over him, right? It's literally Nick Fury. You can't trust him. He keeps a bunch of lies. He's not your friend. He's here for the sake of Earth, right? But regardless, Nick Fury's there and he's talking to the Cap, but also has his phone out with a bunch of notepads open. He's like, I'm running away from the wife, right? It's a bad night, bad night. But on the phone, it's like, Shield has been bugged. Something is going on. Do not trust anybody and take this. And so Steve takes it, and then what's this dude's name? Um, Nick Fury gets shot, and so he gets brought to a hospital, and he's dead. He's pronounced dead. And so Natasha, Steve, and Asian Hill are all there. Asian Hill has to take his body somewhere, so it's Natasha and Steve. Steve gets questioned by her like, "Yo, what's going on?" And he's like, "I'm sorry, I can't say anything." So he goes to Shield, and he gets interrogated by somebody named Alexander Pierce, one of Fury's great friends. They've known each other for a long time. And so he's like, "Yo, what did what did Nick Fury say?" And then Steve is just like, "I'm sorry, I don't know. He told me not to tell a soul, so I'm not going to." And so he leaves. He gets in the elevator, and two people enter, right? Then more people enter. Then more people enter. And Cap starts noticing something about this. This isn't right. Something's not right about this. And so when he sees somebody holding their gun like in their pocket, and somebody starts sweating, he realizes like, hey, how do you guys want to do this? If you want to leave, leave now. But I promise you, it's not going to be easy. And then they just start fighting in the elevator. And this is definitely one of my favorite scenes of the movie because it was so brilliantly set up. It was awesome because like it kind of had like that horror movie tension where you don't know what's going on. but it just felt so natural too. It didn't feel forced or anything like that. I really enjoyed that scene. But Cap manages to take out all the soldiers in there, but there's more soldiers waiting for him outside of his floor. So he jumps out of the elevator because it's a glass elevator, and he lands in the middle of Shield headquarters. So he just dips and he runs, right? And in the hospital that he was at with Natasha, he left the thing that Nick Fury left him. It was a hard drive, and he put it in the vending machine. Unfortunately for him, it's gone because Natasha found it. And Black Widow, her being crazy agent spy type stuff, she's cracked, right? She's going to be cracked. But one thing that I like and kind of also find a little confusing was her change in character compared to when she showed up all the way back Iron Man 2 and the Avengers. She's a lot more open and she cracks a lot of jokes and she has a lot of levity in her job compared to the seriousness that was before. And it's like I guess because she considers Cap a friend and all that, because she's always asking about his love life, trying to make sure that he's good, making sure that he finds somebody because she knows how hard it can be in this line of work, right? Which I find interesting and really sweet. I don't know, it's just seeing this change in her was nice. I really enjoy it. It shows that anybody can change, right? But regardless, her and Cap basically are just talking, and she's like, I think I know who the Winter Soldier is. And so they go to New Jersey, actually. So the reason they go to New Jersey is because they went to the mall, and they're wanted Shield agents now because something's wrong with Shield. So they can't go out in the open, and they have this really nice scene where they're together, they're trying to be spies. She's trying to integrate Cap into the spy type of mindset and all this stuff. But through going to the mall and just putting the chip into a computer, they basically find out like, hey, we need to go to New Jersey, right? And so after a long ride, they go to New Jersey. They're talking, they're having a good time, and in the mall they kiss because Natasha, using her mind, is just like, yo, I know Shield agents are here, so they don't see us. Kiss me and all that. And then in the car, she mentions it like, was that your first time ever kissing somebody after getting defrosted? And then he was like, why does it matter? And it's like, it doesn't matter. It's fine. It's just like, practice is important and all that. He's like, listen, I just, and the man's just all flustered because at the end of the day, Steve is just, he wears his heart on his sleeve type stuff. He's an honest guy who doesn't hide much. He's the opposite of Tony, where Tony hides a lot, but he has this facade that like he's perfectly fine and all this stuff. So I really enjoy that. But regardless, they end up in New Jersey and they enter this military base that was abandoned because of World War II stuff. It was used in that time period, and this was the same base that Cap was trained in back in the first movie. So it's a lot of callbacks to the first movie. I really enjoy that. We enter the training camp, and what we learn is that the scientist from the first movie, he actually turned himself into an AI, and now he's just completely alive in that database. And he's talking to Steve, and he's like, "Yo, the plan is that Hydra is still alive because the U.S. took me in. I continue to Hydra's protocol and all that. So Shield is basically Hydra now. He was stalling the whole time so Shield agent could show up. Luckily, Steve being Steve and Natasha being smart, they both managed to get away. And through a lot of running, they end up at Sam Wilson's house, the same guy from the beginning of the movie. And so Cap is just like, dog, I need your help so bad. Please let us stay here. What we learn from Sam is that he's actually a character in Marvel. He's the Falcon. And so he wasn't just a normal soldier or a pilot. He actually was a hero type stuff, like kind of like James Rhodes from Iron Man type stuff. Cap, Black Widow, and Sam all are just like, yo, we got to do something about Shield, right? And then next thing you know, so this crazy fight happens in the main city. I don't know if Shield is in New York or anything like that, but a crazy fight goes down because Cap, Black Widow, and Falcon are all found out by Shield, and so the Winter Soldier shows up and he just starts beefing with everybody there. And so through this crazy action set piece that goes on, we find out that the Winter Soldier is Bucky from the first movie, James Buchanan Barnes. And Cap is just completely distraught by this. And so when Shield agents surround him, they all take them into the truck and they're about to send them into Shield headquarters. But luckily, Agent Hill showed up and she was in the car the whole time, so she managed to drill a hole big enough for all of them to fit, and then for them to escape. Next, we go to where she takes us, and that's where they're holding Nick Fury's body, because he's alive. He's completely alive. We find out that he never died. He managed to slow his heartbeat to 1 beat per minute to keep him alive, but he basically died. He was pronounced dead for a reason because he was considered dead. Now the plan is we take down Hydra and we're taking down Shield because Shield is just completely Hydra at this point. There's no way to tell who's who and what's going on. So if we take our chance, then Hydra could come back again. So we don't know. But regardless, all three of them and Nick Fury and Agent Hill go to take on all of Hydra and Shield together. And so they manage to infiltrate through the comm systems, and Cap gives a crazy speech about how, like, hey, listen, Hydra has taken over. I know I'm not alone in this fight. I'm willing to bet that. So if you're ready to fight, then please join me. And so the people that aren't with Hydra all start rebelling and all this stuff, and it's just a crazy fight going on right now. So Falcon and Cap are outside trying to take care of the three helicarriers because they're going to be used to destroy and kill 20 million people in the world. And because Hydra's objective is still the same, which is basically just we're going to control everybody's freedom because people can't use freedom. They abuse it. They're going to use those helicarriers to kill people, kill national operatives in the US. So Cap and Falcon are basically just like, yo, we have to take out two of these ships and then we'll take out the third one. So Falcon takes out his, Cap takes out his, and then the third one, Bucky is on there. So Cap has to fight Bucky for the third one. And then Natasha, we find out she's actually with Alexander Pierce as disguised and all this stuff. And she has the whole room held hostage, trying to disable all the orders and everything. Nick Fury shows up. Some switcheroos happen, but next thing you know, Nick Fury manages to take care of Alexander Pierce. He dies, and Natasha's there with him. They're chilling. They're done. Their part is done. So now it's just Cap versus Bucky. The best part of the movie, no doubt. Cap and Bucky's relationship compared to the first movie is just so good. This movie was really good. Like, so the way that they set up like this fight and the tension between Bucky and Cap, because we find out that Bucky's just being brainwashed completely. Because when he saw him in the highway when they were fighting in like the earlier in the movie, he actually recognized him. Like he was like, "Yo, who? I remember him. Who is he?" And then they had to brainwash him again. But luckily, Cap managed to get through him the second time around. So he beats Bucky and he puts the chip in to stop the third helicarrier. And now everything's exploding, right? Shield headquarters is basically dead. A lot of people died, but a lot of people lived because of it. And what Natasha was doing was basically literally putting out all of Shield's dirty laundry and everything, all of its history, including the Hydra stuff. It came at the cost of, everything being known, but at the same time, that's the only way to stop Shield. Or excuse me, not Shield, Hydra. But regardless, Cap and Bucky are going to die. Cap falls out of the ship trying to convince Bucky, like, yo, you know me. No, I don't! That scene was so funny, bro. Oh my gosh. But regardless, Cap falls into the water, and Bucky, having a change of heart, is just like, yo, I'm gonna save you. So he jumps into the water too. He saves Cap, and then he leaves him there. And next thing you know, Cap is in the hospital. Sam is there as well. Natasha had to go up into the front court, into the justice system to testify and all this stuff. Nick Fury has to leave to go to Europe. Natasha has to leave to find another way to, make a secret identity and all this stuff. She goes to talk to Cap and Sam, and she just really cares for Cap. They really become good friends by the end of the movie. She even gives him a kiss on the cheek, and it's just like, yo, go talk to that nurse. Her name's Sharon. She leaves him with that, and then Cap and Sam are left with the information that Natasha gave them on Winter Soldier, on Bucky. So now they're gonna hunt after him and find him to bring him back. Because now Sam and Cap are as thick as thieves. But that's the end of the movie, and if I had to say, this movie was really good. Like at first, I was a bit iffy, but as it came along, it was a really good movie. And I love the way that it ties everything together from the first movie, not just pulling some random villain from out of nowhere. It's still Hydra, at the end of the day. So seeing all this go down, it's like I like Bucky more than Hydra. Having him be the antagonist was way more interesting than just Hydra itself. Because at the end of the day, most of these Marvel movies that involve like a government instead of like a main villain usually are pretty predictable. Like, hey, this one character that got introduced in this movie, you think he's gonna be the bad guy? Probably. Oh wow, he is. That's crazy. So that doesn't really matter. But at the end of the day, it's not like it's crazy, crazy. 'Cause I actually do like Alexander Pierce. I think he's pretty cool. But just overall, Hydra's such an ambiguous and populated group in Shield that it's hard to really track down who the main villain is. Like obviously we know it's Alexander Pierce, but at the same time, how much does that really matter? You know? Because even though he's the leader, he's not like a superhero or a supervillain or anything like that. He's just a normal guy like Nick Fury. And he gets introduced in this movie as well, like I said. So it's not like we have a lot to go off of. It's not like he's been there since the beginning, like all the way back in Iron Man 1. But that's more of a nitpick than it is anything else. Bucky to me was still my favorite part of the movie because of his relationship with Cap and just seeing how good of friends they really were back in Captain America 1, and then seeing this is just like, man, this hurts because I really like their friendship. So seeing how much torture and pain Bucky went through, it hurts. It definitely hurts. And seeing how Cap just doesn't give up on Bucky, it's nice. He knows that Bucky's down there still. So he's going to fight for him, for his friend. He's not going to lose him again. But overall, I thought that the this movie, while it's not much of a Captain America movie as the first one was, because the first one was the introduction. This one still was good, so I don't mind it as much, but this is a trend that starts with this one where it doesn't feel like Captain America is getting his own movies anymore. And it's especially to a Civil War, but I'll talk about that later in the third part of this video, which I just decided I'm gonna do. But regardless, this movie just feels like at certain points it's Captain America and Black Widow, and I don't mind Black Widow because I thought she was great in this movie. But this movie is Captain America, Black Widow, and Nick Fury. It's not Captain America alone, which kind of sucks because at the end of the day, if you have your own trilogy of movies, why aren't you the main character? Why are you sharing a role with somebody who isn't like integral to your story? Black Widow has her own comics and her own story. Nick Fury's the head of Shield, so he's important in every Marvel story. But it just feels like Captain America is a main character, but not the main character in his own movies. But overall, that's my opinions on Captain America and the Winter Soldier. It's definitely an 8 out of 10. But the action was great, the story was good, the characters were great, and overall, it was just an enjoyable ride. It was fun, but it was engaging for sure. So, definitely a good movie. But yeah, on to the third one. Okay, so I'm here now with my opinions on Civil War, and I'm not gonna review it. I am gonna give my rating for it, but I already reviewed it before. My thoughts are on the channel. I may do like a review at some point because that video is pretty old, but this is just gonna be me talking about Civil War, how I feel about it, and just rounding out the Captain America trilogy. So I'm sorry if people were looking forward to that, but I'll try my best to fill that need. So if you want my rating on it now after having rewatched it a year later, it's an 8.5 to a 9 out of 10. I really got to give this movie its props. This is definitely the best Captain America movie and honestly one of the best Marvel movies like they have ever produced. If you weren't around or weren't cognizant of what was going on back in like 2016, when this movie got announced, it was hype because you have to look at the lore surrounding it. And by the way, I'm gonna mention spoilers for this movie, so if you don't want to hear them, that's my rating on it. I think you should watch it if you like Marvel. This is honestly the quintessential movie if you want to get into it. There is stuff that you're gonna miss because I missed a lot of stuff watching this movie, and that kind of influences my opinion now. But if you don't want to get spoiled, please leave. I really do recommend watching this movie. But the cultural zeitgeist going on when this movie was announced and releasing was that this Captain America movie was going to be huge because Civil War and like the comics is always hyped up, you know. There are certain events in Marvel history, just like in DC and any comics, right, that are huge, quintessential to the comics, right, where a bunch of superheroes just come together to do something. And Civil War is one of them. So the way Marvel was going to handle it was going to be interesting because we already have two bangers with the Avengers movies, good rep with the all three of the Iron Man movies. Winter Soldier came out 2 years ago. The Thor movies were doing good. Guardians of the Galaxy came out. All this stuff, right? Everything was going crazy. So seeing the trailers and then seeing Black Panther, Wanda came back, Vision's still here. You see Clint, and you see, you know, the normal Avengers. You have Falcon, you have Rhodey, and all these people, right? And then out of nowhere, you just see Spider-Man show up, and it's Tom Holland. It's like, yo, who is this kid? We don't know who he is. And this is before all the rep that he got from being in all those movies, right? So seeing Spider-Man show up in the MCU, like, you gotta understand that Sony was the one that held the rights to Spider-Man, and they still do to this day. They're the ones that produced the Spider-Verse movies, the Andrew Garfield and the Sam Raimi movies as well. So having them let Marvel do a three-movie trilogy with Spider-Man on top of being included in some movies is like, yo, this is so cool because we have had no mention of Spider-Man in Marvel up to this point. So during this time period when the movie was releasing, people were hyped for sure. There were a bunch of new characters getting added, so many new actors, and it was just freshening up the MCU. Marvel was on a roll, hitter after hitter after hitter, and they wouldn't stop for a long time. So that's kind of like the background and some context because I remember back in 2016, I was like in eighth grade. I was talking to some friends of mine that I still talk to this day, and they were all just super hyped, mainly because of Spider Man. Because Spider Man is definitely a favorite between me and some of my friends. But yeah, so let me talk about the movie the first time I watched it. I really enjoyed it. I really, really enjoyed it. I thought it was cool. It was definitely the first movie that I watched. If you look at my channel, it was the first movie I watched while I was going on my Marvel binge. So I watched that, the two like Infinity War and Endgame. I watched Doctor Strange, all two of the Spider-Man like Tom Holland movies, and then when the third one came out, I watched that. So I was going on a binge, and it all started with Civil War. But as time progressed and I watched more Marvel, I started disliking the movie. And it definitely wasn't aided by the fact that I watched the first two Captain America movies, and I was like, man, from what I remember from Civil War, it didn't really feel like a Captain America movie. But that I didn't feel like that the first time I watched it because I didn't have a background for what a Captain America movie was. I only knew him from the Avengers movies and all that, right? So it just kind of grew and grew to the point where like I started really disliking the movie. It just didn't feel like Captain America to me after watching the first two. But after having rewatched it, I can definitely say that I've come to a firmer stance and I've gone back to really liking this movie for sure. It is again the best Captain America movie and one of the best Marvel movies ever produced. And let me explain what I mean by that. So, problem number one, this doesn't feel like a Captain America movie. The counter argument to that I've come up with is it is a Captain America movie. It's just the parts that were Captain America I didn't understand because I didn't have the context for it. So this movie heavily hinges on that fact that you've watched the first two. It has characters from Winter Soldier, from the first Avenger, and overall Captain America is the first Avenger. That's why they called that movie that title. Because Captain America is the quintessential Avenger. He is the leader. So of course, if it's his movie, that some other Avengers or other characters are going to be involved because he's either usually fighting a pretty big threat or it's involved in internal affairs type stuff. But I missed the mark by a huge margin because there was a lot of Captain America lore in this movie. This was the Captain America movie for sure. It wasn't just like, oh, we have all these new characters. It feels like Captain America isn't getting his spotlight. And that was my main complaint was that he just wasn't the main character in his own movie, but he was. Captain America definitely had the most scenes, and I'm glad that the Russo brothers definitely gave him that spotlight and like the people directing it and just overall they made sure that this was a Captain America movie. because there was just a lot of stuff that I missed because I didn't have the context, like I mentioned earlier. So having that context now, I really see you mainly need Captain America 1 and 2, but you're also going to need the Avengers movie as well, the Age of Ultron, because that influences a lot in this movie, like with the main villain and his motivations. What happened in Sokovia and the fact that the Sokovia Accords were made and all that stuff was because of Age of Ultron. So you need three movies where it's like it's cool that there's interconnectivity between movies and that actions taken in one movie influence another one where even if they're not related like in superhero lore, that does affect it. So to explain the plot of the story real quick, like a quick summary. Basically, we have Captain America, Wanda from the Avengers movie, Black Widow, and Falcon, right? Sam Wilson. They're in Nigeria to hunt down this man, Crossbones. And Crossbones is actually the guy from Winter Soldier, one of the main Hydra guys who had a building fall on him and he became Crossbones because of it. So he's just had a crazy, like, hateful rage against Captain America because of it. So one thing leads to another, and Nigeria gets blown up because Wanda tries to contain an explosion, and she leads it over to a building where a bunch of people die, and some people involved in it were Wakandans, right? And Wakandans are from Black Panther, where they're a whole civilization that have vibranium, a really rare metal that is important in Marvel. King T'Chaka from Wakanda has a meeting with other world nations because this was foreign soil in Africa, and on top of that, it involved foreign parties. So they've all come to an agreement and they made the Sokovia Files, or excuse me, the Sokovia Accords. And it's basically the Avengers are going to be a government owned group and they're not going to act alone anymore because Tony brings up a good point. If we aren't held by authority, not like a government authority, but more like we hold ourselves accountable, we're responsible, then we're no better than the bad guys. And it's true. Because Sokovia was completely destroyed. Completely destroyed. Nigeria had a bunch of casualties. New York, while that wasn't their fault, at the end of the day, it was them like destroying a huge part of it, fighting the aliens, and also Winter Soldier as well in Washington D.C. It was just a bunch of stuff. So we have a divide between the Avengers. Black Widow, Tony, Rhodes, and Vision all agree to sign the Sokovia Accords. Captain America, Sam Wilson, Wanda don't want to sign the Sokovia Accords. And this divide is only going to grow bigger in the movie, but that's basically the whole plot of the movie. Do we sign the Sokovia Accords or do we not? Cap doesn't want to because he feels like it's restricting the Avengers' freedom. And at the end of the day, what happens if we get sent somewhere that we don't want to be, or what happens if we get sent somewhere but we need to be somewhere else? But because it's a government-owned faction, we can't act on our own. Black Widow goes to sign the Sokovia Accords on behalf of the Avengers, and she meets T'Challa, King T'Chaka's son, right? The next in line to the throne. They're having a good talk, all this stuff, and T'Challa notices something outside, and it's a bomb threat. So he tries to cover his dad, but his dad dies in the explosion. So now he's super upset. And Black Widow's like, please don't do this. And we find out that the person that did it was Bucky, so now T'Challa's just going after Bucky, trying to find him, and Cap is like, "Oh no, Bucky, please, why'd you do this?" And so Bucky talks to Cap once Cap finds him, and he's like, "I didn't do it. I promise you, I didn't do it." Cap and Bucky are together now, and they're running from T'Challa and everybody after them and all that, right? Because now that Tony signed the Sokovia Accords, he's a part of the government, and so they're the ones dictating all the actions. After a long chase, they get detained in a holding facility, and Tony and Cap are talking. Tony really wants him to sign it because at the end of the day, even though they're coworkers, they're all of them are also friends. They fought life and death between everything, so why wouldn't they have a kinship? They do care for each other. Bucky's being interviewed by a psychiatrist and all that. But what we find out is that the main bad guy, Zemo, so he's been infiltrating the facility that they're holding Bucky, and he got in and he basically is interviewing him right now, and he cut the power because he used an EMP like 50 miles away, like simultaneously. And so he's talking to Bucky, and he uses the sleeper codes that they used on him back in like 1991 when he was still in Russian property. And it reawakens the Winter Soldier, basically, asking Bucky what happened in 1991. So after the main bad guy escapes, because he's still kind of like an underground type of guy, Bucky, Cap, and Sam all leave to basically find out more information on what's happening because they trust Bucky's opinion. Even though he's a sleeper agent, they still understand that he was the one on those missions and he understands what the plans were. There were other Winter Soldiers like them, and they're asleep right now. So he may be trying to reawaken all those other Winter Soldiers. So their handler on the inside, Peggy's niece, is helping Captain America out a lot because she was also in Winter Soldier. She was his neighbor, and she works for Shield as well. She gives him a bunch of information. Cap is basically ready to just like, yeah, we're gonna go after him. We're gonna find out what the truth is. All this stuff. Tony, on the other hand, is gathering people ready to fight Cap because Cap is ready to beef with people, right? And Cap is doing the same thing. So Clint joins Cap's side, Wanda joins Cap's side, while Vision, Spider-Man join Tony's side, along with Black Panther joining Tony's side because he just wants to kill Bucky because he killed his dad, right? And Ant-Man as well. Ant-Man, like Hank Pym, well, no, Scott Lang, there you go, joins Cap's side. So that's the main people right now fighting each other. So they meet up at this airport, and it's just all out war. This was what the movie was hyping up for the longest time. Just superheroes fighting each other at an airport, and it was crazy. But it leads to Cap and Bucky leaving while Falcon, Wanda, Clint, and Scott all get left behind to cover for them, right? And Black Widow, since she's still on Tony's side, she manages to make a distraction for Cap because she still believes in him. She's gonna trust him, right? Because at the end of the day, Cap wouldn't do this senselessly. There's a reason for it, and we know that reason. There's a bigger person at play right now, despite the civil war going on. So Cap goes to Siberia with Bucky, and Tony follows them because he sees something's wrong, and he sees the information. There was a murder in Berlin when the Sokovia Accords were going to be signed, and when they were interviewing Bucky, the person that was supposed to interview him died, and it was because of Zemo. So now Tony's following Cap. They meet up and they're like, "Listen, I'm only here on a truce, right? Let's just end this for right now." And so they go, they find him, and Zemo basically reveals that Bucky killed Tony's parents. And so now it's Bucky and Cap versus Tony. It's like, bro, oh my gosh. T'Challa also chased behind Tony, and now he's gonna go try to kill Bucky. Learning about the fact that Zemo was the one that killed T'Challa's dad, it wasn't Bucky. He goes to find him instead of helping Cap or any of them. And he's like, you almost made me kill the wrong person. And he's like, listen, my goal wasn't to kill them. Nobody could do that. At least not me. My goal was to tear them apart. Because then at least they could kill each other. Because of what happened in Sokovia, he lost his wife and his son. So this whole time he was playing recordings of his wife and son through his phone, but they were long since deceased. It's been a year since Sokovia. He's been plotting and scheming, doing this the entire time. And then T'Challa is like, listen, you were fueled by vengeance. They are fueled by vengeance. But I'm no longer gonna let it consume me. And then Zemo tries to kill himself with a gun, but T'Challa catches the bullet last second and tells him that you're gonna be reprimanded by the law. There's no way of escaping this. And so Tony's still fighting those two, and he's holding out his own. Like he's genuinely doing his best against an enhanced super soldier and a winter soldier. So he's doing his best and he's holding out, but he has the Iron Man suit, so that's why it's playing field, a level playing field. Cap wins. He debilitates Tony's suit and he gets away with Bucky. And this is basically the end of the Avengers. Tony goes back to Rhodes because he almost got or he is paralyzed because of the fight in the airport, and he's trying to help them rehabilitate. And he gets a letter from Captain America, and it's basically telling him like, listen, there's nothing that can be done to fix what happened, and there's nothing that can be done to help ease the pain of what I did to you and what everybody else did, right? But just know you're the leader of the Avengers now. They're yours. I won't cause any trouble with that, and that I will be there for you. Just call. Know that I am still your friend, basically. And then that's where it ends. The last shot is Tony. while Cap is on the run. And that's the end of the movie. So I can definitely say that I was wrong. I was wholeheartedly wrong. I think I mentioned it in this video that like I didn't like Civil War and that was I wasn't going to watch it. I like Civil War. I like it just as much as I did back then, if not maybe even more because I understand it better. But also, it is the best Captain America movie and one of the best movies in Marvel. Period. It my one of my complaints was that it felt like an Avengers movie, and it technically is because of how many people there are. But Captain America is the sole focus. He is the main character in his movie. Him finally getting to see Bucky, them recollecting their memories and just helping each other out, and then finally being able to be together in a world so different from their own. I grossly misjudged what my problems were with this movie, and I can definitely say that it's definitely one of my favorite Marvel movies now for sure. It's just dope. It sets up so much for the future, gives so many characters new avenues to have their own movies, like with Black Panther and Spider-Man, giving him three of them, and just involving them in the MCU. Marvel was really ambitious with what they were doing, and this was definitely, I'd say, like this was the beginning of the golden age for Marvel. From here up until like Endgame, around there, I'd say like that's the peak. I don't know. It's difficult to say, but Civil War was great. I'll definitely rescind my opinion on that. And one of the main reasons I actually am doing this part of the video is because I told Reaper that I didn't really like it anymore, and then he was like, really, he was surprised. So I thought, let me give it a fair shake. Let me see if I really still feel like that. And no, so he's definitely gonna be happy to see that because he really likes this movie too. But yeah, that's basically all I have to say about the Captain America trilogy. Hey, so I'm coming in here to basically redo the outro because it was terrible. I hated it. So, thank y'all for watching. Hope y'all enjoy. If you enjoyed, please consider liking and subscribing. It would definitely mean a lot after this crazy endeavor that was this entire video. Because usually, if I do a long video, it's me talking about one singular thing like Made in Abyss. But this was three different videos or three different movies, excuse me. So going through that time period of like, watch this movie, then I have to watch the other ones that came in between, then this one, then this one. It's definitely surprising, but it was fun. I really enjoyed it. So maybe I'll do more of these types of videos when I deem it necessary, because I felt like this one was necessary because I already watched one of them. But yeah, I can't wait to continue for the final Marvel movies that I have to watch. And you guys will see those videos. There's only going to be like two more videos, I think, so be ready for those. But yeah, hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you all later. Peace.